surprise, a new filming location. Hello everybody, my name is Tanya and this is my January wrap up. So as you can see, we're not in the usual place for filming. These are some brand new bookshelves that I have just received and put up. I've been putting a few photos up on my Instagram, which I don't think I've spoken about on this channel before. I've recently started Instagram. I think I started at the start of the year, so it's ListObsessedReader like here, and it's always linked down below now. So I finished 5 things in the month of January, 3 books and 2 audiobooks, and let's get into them. The first thing I completed in January was an audiobook, although I do own the physical book as well, and that is Tower of Thorns by Juliet Maria, which is the second book in her Blackthorn and Grimm series. I love this so much. I mean, you all know by now that I'm absolutely obsessed with Juliet Maria, but this was fantastic. I really loved it. And it's really quite appropriate because the first book that I finished in 2015 happened to be the first book in this series, which is Dreamer's Pool, and again I completed that on audiobook, and so it was kind of this nice symmetry to then have the first book that I completed in 2016 be the second book in the series. So I'm struggling to find the words to actually describe what this one is about. Basically, this is the further kind of exploits of Blackthorn and Grimm and another adventure that they get themselves embroiled in. So basically in this one they're called upon to assist Lady Galace, and Lady Galace and her lands are suffering a curse. And that curse is in the form of a monster who comes to the Tower of Thorns and spends each day up there shrieking, and the tower is completely surrounded by thorns, and there's kind of this prophecy as such of certain conditions that have to be met for this curse to be broken. I really enjoyed the first book in this series, Dreamer's Pool, but this one I loved even more. I really adored the characters of Blackthorn and Grimm. Blackthorn is very prickly, very angry, rightly so. She's suffered horrible things in her past, and she is very single-mindedly wanting revenge, where things that happen in Dreamer's Pool mean that she's not able to pursue at this point in time. And it's frustrating watching her go through that and still kind of wanting, single-mindedly driving for this revenge, and it's kind of like these restrictions that have been put on you are for your own good if you just learn that. And so obviously we're going to have to go over a period of her learning that, but having that reiterated in this one, you know, can get a little bit repetitive, but is an important part of her character. Grimm, on the other hand, you know, is also a deeply flawed character. We get a lot more of his past in this one, which is wonderful. Learning more about Grimm and why Grimm is the way he is. In Dreamer's Pool we learn more about Blackthorn's past. This time we fill in the gaps of Grimm, and that was wonderful too. He's such a just solid, dependable, wonderful character with his own, you know, vulnerabilities, and I think she's created some really amazing characters here that you can really root for, and yeah, I'm really interested to see where the story goes next. And this was a wonderful way to start 2016. The second book I completed in January was a buddy read, and that was The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox. This one I read with Alicia from Ex Libris and Ange from Beyond the Pages, and I'm still conflicted as to what I thought about this one. So basically this is exactly what it sounds like. This is the female version of Don Quixote. So this one was written kind of as a play on Don Quixote, which in turn is kind of making fun of the great romances of that era. And in this one we follow the character of Arabella, who, like Don Quixote, has read a lot of the romances, and that has kind of clouded her thoughts on what acceptable and appropriate behaviour is. And as the, you know, characters in a lot of these romances are very much over the top, very much exaggerated, her character and her reactions and behaviour is very much exaggerated, and that gets quite annoying, and kind of just, I went into this book prepared for a lot of eye rolling. Like, I thought it would be a very eye rolling book, but in a really amusing way. It was a very eye rolling book. It was amusing, but maybe not as amusing as I hoped, and a little bit more on the irritating side. So basically, as I said, we're following our character of Arabella. Her mother died when she was quite young. She's grown up reading the romances that her mother had left. Her father has raised her away from society, and the views that she has developed from reading those romances about what society is all about is very skewed. So basically, Arabella, in this story, every male is out to ravish her. They're going to come and kidnap her and take her away. They're all madly in love with her. How dare they even speak about affection though, because that's mortally offending. The gardener is actually a man of quality who's working as a gardener because he needs to get close to her. It's just a gardener. And, you know, like, it's just, everything is over dramatized, and it's just, take a chill pill. And so it was funny, but it kind of went too long, I guess. Now, this isn't very long. It, I think, is 500 pages, so it's long enough. But when we consider that Don Quixote is massive, this really isn't all that long. But it may be, weird a little bit too soon. Let it be said here, I absolutely love Don Quixote. I thought it was hilarious. I listened to the audiobook of that one, and it took me forever to listen to, but I just laughed down the road every day because everything he did was so absurd. And I know that for a lot of people, Don Quixote gets very annoying too, but for some reason that one worked for me. This still worked, but I think I didn't need to read quite so much of it, or, so many examples of how ridiculous Arabella is, and so many, different escapades that she gets herself into. I think the end of it really picks up, and when a lot of things start happening in quick succession, and, the way it ends, I'm not going to give it all away, but it's just, an observation I made in our discussion was, and I don't know how much I'm misremembering this or not, but it felt like Don Quixote, the way that he's affected by his delusion is he's going to go out and be a knight errant, and he's, got his one lady that he's kind of putting up on a pedestal, and he's going out and, doing these chivalrous deeds as such, but it's not, it doesn't feel like it's from a place of conceit. Whereas with Arabella, I think it's all very internalized, as everybody's in love with me, and everything revolves around me, and it becomes as very conceited, and she's not necessarily meaning to be that, but it reads that way, and that kind of character, I don't care for so much, so I think that's where I failed to connect with Arabella a bit more. For all that, I didn't dislike this one, I did enjoy it. It just frustrated me a little bit, as it turns out. But I am really, really pleased to have read this one, and I enjoyed the conversation with Alicia and Ange, and yes, that was the next book that I read in January. The next book I completed in January is something that should have been completed in December, but better late than never, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith, which was my December Booktube Recommends pick, and the one from Heather from Logical Betty, and I loved this book so much, so much, and everything that I heard about it leading up made me think that I would, and I really, really did. So as usual, I'm not going to talk too much about this one here because there will be an individual review video coming. I am still a few behind. I've got a few of those to film, but now that I've completed everything, I will hopefully get that happening soon. This one, as I'm sure you already know, follows the story of Francie Nolan, who is a young girl growing up in the slums of Brooklyn in the early 1900s, and it's just a really quiet, lovely story of her coming of age and her family and their struggles with poverty, and it's just, there's not a lot of action. It's just quiet and lovely and beautiful, and I loved it. And so I will be filming a review video about this one soon. And the next book I read in January was another audiobook, and this one was The Roma Bride by Margaret Atwood, and I really, really enjoyed this. So I've been meaning to get to this one since I watched Mercedes do a review video about this one. I assume it was last year, not earlier than that again, I don't know, but I saw Mercedes talk about it. It's something that had been on my radar. I definitely want to read more Margaret Atwood, and it happens to be on the 1001 Books You Must Read Before You Die list, so I of course wanted to get to that one over other ones. So as the story opens, we're following the three characters, Tony, Roz and Karis, and they're having lunch, and they're kind of remembering their past, and in their past a woman named Xenia has kind of wrought absolute havoc on each of their individual lives. And a number of years before this lunch, Xenia passed away. They were kind of, freed from that presence, from that burden, and then as they're having lunch, Xenia walks in, and it goes on from there. So from there we go back in each of their lives, and it relates the period where Xenia, came into their lives. It goes back and tells the stories of their childhood. It, tells the stories of what's happened between Xenia's supposed death and now, and kind of goes forward with, now that they know Xenia is actually still alive, what happens next. And the perspective changes from each of the three characters. We have sections narrated by Tony, by Rose, by Karis, and filling in these parts of each of their lives, and how Xenia keeps coming back into each of their lives, and the influence she's having on them. The three friends, and therefore their three voices, were very different, and I enjoyed kind of finding out about each of their pasts. Tony is a teacher who focuses on war. Roz is kind of a corporate businesswoman in charge of a magazine, and Karis is a free spirit, and kind of the dynamic of what's brought them together is they're united experiences with Xenia. Everything that I've read by Margaret Atwood has been very, very different from the others. This one, I guess, style-wise, is most similar to The Blind Assassin that I've read, in that I guess it's classed as general fiction, although The Blind Assassin has got some interesting elements within it too that maybe don't make it, fiction, basic fiction, but maybe a little bit into, the science fiction elements, and it's, I find Margaret Atwood it's hard to class her as one thing because everything I've read by her has been very, very different. And I'm really enjoying the journey of reading her books and seeing just what else she can do. And as with everything else, this was excellently written. I really enjoyed it. There were a few elements that felt a little bit dated to me, in that I think a lot of the action, it might be just into the 90s, but kind of coming through the 80s, and a few viewpoints that maybe are not quite the way things are thought about now. But for the most part, I found it absolutely fascinating and really, really enjoyed it. The last book that I finished in the month of January was, of course, my Agatha Christie, and this time around it was Crooked House. So this is one of her standalone stories, and there's a letter in the front of this from Agatha Christie herself saying that this is one of her own personal favourites, and that it was a story that she had in her head for a long time coming, and that kind of finally came together in a time that she could write the story down. And so I was interested going in to read, what was purportedly one of Agatha Christie's favourites of her works, and whether I would agree with that. I did really enjoy this. I'm thinking maybe a reread knowing the solution might be a really interesting thing, because I don't think I fully grasped all of the implications kind of looking back now at what the outcome is. I think it needs a reread to fully appreciate it. Now that may be the way that I read it. It's not, I think, going to be the experience for everybody, but that's how I personally feel having read it, that I think it will benefit for a reread, knowing the solution. This one is following the large Leonidas family and what happens when the patriarch of that family is killed through a fatal injection, and kind of the suspicions that fall from there. So this one is told from the perspective of Charles Hayward, who is in love with the granddaughter of the deceased man, and she is refusing to agree to marry him kind of until the cloud of this murder has been solved. And so it kind of focuses on him getting to know the family and kind of find out what happened, basically. And so suspicion immediately falls on Brenda, who is the young wife of the deceased man. So against his family's wishes, the old man has remarried a much younger woman. Everyone wants to believe that Brenda was the one who did it, but each of the family members are worried that it may be one of them. And so it kind of goes through and looks at everybody in the family who maybe or maybe does not have a motive for the murder, and kind of Charles comes in and, is in the situation of, is he with the police? Is he just working on his own? Is he there as somebody who's wanting to marry into the family? But all the time kind of gaining information. So as with any Agatha Christie, suspicions shift and move, and twists and turns ensue, and I think I really, the outcome of it's fascinating, and the outcome, like I said, I think I just need to sit down and think about it a bit more, because I'm still processing the implications of all of that, and I think, reading it with the new eyes, picking up the clues through this, I think would be really fascinating. So these are the books that I was able to complete in the month of January, plus the audiobook of The Roma Bride by Margaret Atwood. If you've read any of these ones, I'd love to hear what you thought about them down in the comments, or if you have any questions. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!